Well, thank you very much for this kind introduction, and a warm welcome from me to you all here in Wrocław, and also to all participants in Australia. First of all, many thanks to Renata Tanchuk and Aga Jablonska for organizing this conference. I think it's really unique. It's really unique, this event, that we all come together from Australia, from Germany, from Poland, and discuss this very important topic. So thank you very much for doing this and for inviting me. And also thanks a lot to the speakers in the morning session. That was really inspiring for me to listen to you all. Greetings to Hillary and Paul, Sarah, and Naomi. I know you and the places where you are at present. So that was really also very good, very nice, really. Now, let's start my presentation. And, well, as a start, I included, and I will include, some historical photographs of Klaatsch in Australia. Okay, that's better, I think. And this is an excursion in the countryside near Wyndham, Western Australia, in July, September 1906. Photo of Hermann Klaatsch standing at the left-hand side, and the right-hand side, the white fellow, that's Dr. Maloney, doctor, police magistrate of Wyndham. But they're not only white people on this photo, there are also two indigenous people. One is a cook, cooking dinner, that kangaroo in the fire, and the other one is caring for the horses. So it's interesting also in this photograph to analyze colonial photography. This presentation contains, of course, names and images about deceased people, which might cause distress for some readers and onlookers. And also, I usually have this advice not to take photos or make screenshots, because I talk to larger audiences, smaller audiences, and people go click, 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 click. And this is, I don't know how you feel about this. Of course, I don't want to conceal anything. The truth must be told, and I will tell you the truth, or at least Klaatsch's truth, but there may be some reasons, copyright reasons, private reasons, also disturbing or upsetting reasons why it may come as a shock to have isolated documents circulating, like Sarah and Naomi were saying, that no, it's a shock to hear about that. And I will show you osteological lists of Klaatsch. And so it's better to have them in a context, that I think. But we can discuss this, what you think and what you in Australia think about that. So this is my overview of what I'm going to talk about. Introduction, who was Klaatsch, and why he traveled to Australia, most of the things we have already heard. But then a critical assessment of his ethnographic collection and his collection of human remains, his aims, networks, methods, and so on, his lists of osteological acquisitions, and so on. And then the reflections, the research value of Klaatsch's documents, approaches for future research and possible repatriation, or the cases in Germany. And as the last slide, Klaatsch has a multifaceted personality, because he had many sides to his person. So who was Hermann Klaatsch? We heard a lot about that already in the morning. You know that he was a Berlin-born doctor, medical doctor in the first place, physical anthropologist and comparative anatomist, that he studied at Heidelberg University and completed his habilitation. But then he left university and worked as an independent scholar until 1904, when he traveled to Australia and Java for 3 years. And after that, he became professor of anatomy here in Wrocław. And because of his new responsibilities as university professor, and because he turned his attention to the new fossil finds in Germany and southern France, maybe in the Dordogne, his focus shifted away from Australia after his 3-year stay there. He died suddenly in 1916 while giving lectures, while being on a trip giving lectures. So what's important to mention here also that all publications after 1916, although it says Hermann Klaatsch, they're not by him, they're by others who changed the text and so on. So that's not his original, these are not the original manuscripts and so on. Why did he travel to Australia? We heard about Otto Schürtensack. That's a photo that Paul used also. Schürtensack, he was a chemist, but also had interests in paleontology and anthropology. And these two friends were Darwinists, interested in the origin of the species and so on. And they were speculating about where this anthropogenesis did take place in prehistory. And Schürtensack, he believed that given the specific ecoclimatic conditions in Australia, the evolution of mankind had happened on the 5th continent. And Schürtensack, he was suffering from bad health because he had handled chemicals without proper protection. The two friends decided that Klaatsch, who had no work or family obligations, that he should travel to Australia instead to find evidence for this Out of Australia collection theory. So when the opportunity arose, quite suddenly, Klaatsch left Germany in February 1904. So he was a very spontaneous person. How did Klaatsch, in fact, manage, was able to go to Australia and travel there and go back again? That's why he met Francis, the businessman, from North Queensland, and Clotten was going to travel to North Queensland soon to inspect his mine. So when they met again at a private meeting, then they agreed that Clotten would take Klaatsch with him, pay for the trip over, also finances photographic equipment, and when also helped Klaatsch indirectly getting human remains in North Queensland. I will talk about that example later on. And when Klaatsch wanted to return to Germany in 1907, he also paid for the trip over, which was via the Pacific, all across the United States, and then across the Atlantic. This is maybe one photo that I found recently, which may depict Clotten. He's hard to find in history who he was, but Mrs. Clotten is identifiable on other photos, so I thought this might be him. Now let me have a. So where and how in Australia did Klaatsch travel? That's a self-drawn map I recently found in the documents. He traveled, as you can see, he traveled all along the coastline and hardly ever inland. Only in North Queensland he was able to travel a little bit into the interior, for instance, to the Atherton Tablelands, and he had a free ticket for all trains from the government, very important for him, so he was able to move around freely without costs. Costs were very expensive. On Melville Island, he also traveled inland a little bit to the camp of buffalo hunters. Joe Cooper was his name, where he lived with indigenous people there together. But apart from that, he mainly used ships traveling up and down the coasts, as you can see from this map. Well, Klaatsch spent the entire first year in Queensland, where he met Walter E. Ross, the Queensland protector for Aborigines, who helped him in many ways. For instance, Klaatsch could use a government sailboat Belvedere, which means messenger in the local language, and to travel around the Gulf of Carpentaria. But during these travels in Queensland, it sort of dawned on him, no matter what all the theories were, his publications and so on, it dawned on him that he would not be able to find really evidence for this out of Australia theory by Schürtensack. So he had to look for other means of keeping on traveling, financing his travels. And at that time, the letters from German museums came in and began to reach him if he would be able to collect artifacts for their museum collections. And they, in turn, would pay him for that. So he quickly grasped this opportunity and started to collect artifacts. Now, at a certain amount, and he got other letters later on, not only from one, other letters were coming in from other museums as well. So he turned into a collector of ethnographic artifacts, and there, for instance, some artifacts from North Queensland, from the Western Cape York Peninsula, and those decorations made from seashells. And it's documented that these were the first artifacts that he actively picked up and collected for his starting collections. However, he was, of course, equally interested in getting human remains as well. He didn't do this for the German Museums of Ethnology. They didn't ask him to do this. But he did it for his own ambitions as physical anthropologist and comparative anatomist, for his future career, of course, and also as a means for maintaining his networks in the academic world, like sending human remains to important colleagues in Germany, to the Royal Academy in Berlin, sending a dead body from Australian Aborigines, saying, hey, look what I've got for you, and isn't that, am I not a great academic? So he did it for his own reputation as well, and maintaining his networks. So parallel to his ethnographic artifacts and collections, he used every opportunity and every method to also obtain human remains. And he kept lists of osteological acquisitions. I will show them. And these were the lists. But he also mentioned it in his letters, in his notebooks, in his other notes he had, fragments, papers, and so on. So it's here, there, and everywhere in the documents. So the documents from his Australian journey are manifold. He kept, he took the photographs and made lists of the photographs. He wrote letters to Schüttensack, very many, very long letters. He had notebooks and diaries where he noted a lot of things. He made drawings, but let also other people do drawings, also children, indigenous children. He had manuscripts, artifact lists, indigenous vocabularies, very important source for linguistic research, ethnographic questionnaires, anthropometric charts. He started with that as well. He collected newspaper clippings and all kinds of things. So here you see one of his photographs and his own numbering and classification system. Let's see, North Queensland, East, which means Ost in German, Bellendenker, which is a mountain range in North Queensland. Why did he never publish his Australian book? There are many reasons for it. He wrote three different manuscripts, but in the end, he never published it. And the reasons are quite interesting. He disliked the British colonial government and the way they maltreated the Aboriginal population. And he criticized that a lot. What the police, what the common white people, what the missionaries and so on, what they did at cattle station owners, what they did to indigenous people. But on the other hand, he had also received a lot of help from them. He had a free ticket from the government. So he couldn't sort of publish a book and scandalize the government. He was ambivalent if he should do this. So, that's why he never did it. But then World War I started, and now all of a sudden Germany and Great Britain were enemies in the war. Then he felt free to now say openly what he thought of the British. So then he said, I will write my book and publish my book now. Then he wrote his third manuscript, but then he died without ever having finished it. So that's the reason why all these documents still exist, but were never published. They still existed in the family, and thanks also to the grandson who took his grandfather's documents with him wherever he went. He emigrated to the USA and moved around there, and he always took it with him. How did I become involved in this? I was informed about all these documents in 2002. We applied for research grants, which were finally successful. I flew to the United States 3 times to the Klaatsch family home, digitized the materials. You see the notebooks here. You can see the size of it. Small notebooks with a lot of pages in it. And I digitized every page, transcribed it, and analyzed it in Cologne. And my focus at that time was the ethnographic collections in Cologne, where I worked at the time, Leipzig, Hamburg, and also in Warsaw, where I was in 2005, plus Klaatsch's scientific perception of indigenous culture and society. In general, that was the overall question. So in 2010 and 18, I could publish the results from that. Other research and was, for instance, about the linguistic studies, which I mentioned. This one, 2 of the 12 notebooks from Australia are entirely about the Nyul culture and language. Up here, you see where we are in in Australia. So I was and I am involved in linguistic research. It's a Nyul German dictionary. Interesting in this is also that, you know, indigenous people were given names, British names, missionary names, like all of a sudden they were called Adam, Sarah, and Jacob, and so on. But they also had, of course, their real names. And Klaatsch was one. I don't know any other scholar who did this. He wrote tables of the British name and of the real indigenous names. Now, last year and this year, I was able to move all the Klaatsch documents to Mannheim. It was agreed upon by the family that, well, they didn't want to keep it in their family forever because they live in the United States now. Children, grandchildren grow up there. They don't know German anymore. And it's all in German. It's about a German scholar. The collections are here in Europe. I offered to have it in our archive and our museum in Mannheim. So it was agreed that we move it. And I did. I flew over last year and did all the packing and organizing. And then it arrived in my office this February and March. And since then we did an inventory of all the material with the help of some students, because it's really a lot now. Now, a critical assessment of Klaatsch's legacy, his ethnographic collection, and also the human remains, collection of human remains, and the sensitive parts in it. Okay, I'm afraid you cannot read this. But you get an impression how Klaatsch kept his lists, ethnographic lists of ethnographic artifacts, the numbers, amount of fish spears, for instance, and all that. And he wrote many, many lists of this. So he kept a good documentary. And the story is that it was sent to the museums who had written letters to him. Could you please collect for us? So they were sent there to Leipzig, Hamburg. Then the Cologne Museum offered to do a whole exhibition with his entire collection. So they were all redirected to Cologne. The museum directors in Leipzig and Hamburg were not amused about that. But after the exhibition in Cologne, the collection was redistributed again to those museums who had already paid for it, and one part went to Warsaw. But it's unclear in the documents whether Klaatsch just took the rest with him or if he deliberately picked his choice before. it was distributed to the others. But he knew quite well that he had to satisfy those other museum directors as well. So it was probably a compromise. So what kinds of methods did he use for his ethnographic collection? Direct negotiations with the original producers, acquisitions through local inhabitants of the area, from the police who had disarmed indigenous people and kept the artifacts, and then they were given away to any traveling collector who was interested in it. He also used absence in camps. People had been driven away or left during the day. He just took artifacts that were left over. Also from missionaries, indigenous people had to give away their artifacts when they were driven to the mission stations at one place, in some places when they adopted Christianity. But Klaatsch was also able to collect artifacts, very sensitive artifacts from the missionaries at Beagle Bay, because they said, here's a collector, a friend of ours, please give them your artifacts. And so that's with the help of all these people, Klaatsch was able to collect his ethnographic collection. And here are some examples. Some were produced or commissioned on the wish of the collector. Please make these boat models. I come back next year and then I will collect them. Or what we cannot see here, he also integrated artifacts which were made of modern material, like the bottom of green glass bottles. Okay, human remains and their documentation. Now we come to the core point. A list of ethnographic artifacts suddenly turns into a list of Osteologica. Osteologica Zugang. Accession since so-and-so, 21st of January until February. And he lists the numbers 26 to 28 and is describing the skeletal, the skulls and the skeletal parts and remains, male or female, how the people died and how they looked like, and some anthropological information along with that. And there's a pencil handwriting in between, which you can't see in this presentation very good, but very well. But yes, 5 minutes, okay. Sorry, you can't read it in detail, but the pencil handwriting was by Schüttensack, and he had the lists typed. And here you see even more information about these individuals, numbers 26 to 28. So who these people were, where they lived, how they died, and so on. It's all in these lists. Let me see. Now, this is a list of my osteological collection of Australian Aborigines, number 1 to number 25. So this is the start of it, the beginning. See, I'm presenting to you the documents, how I found them in the in the whole archival material. Now, suddenly it turns out there's a list starting with the number 1. It's all quite well described, the skulls, the skeletal parts, and so on, how this, what kind of person, male, female, the condition, and so on. And number 9 is very interesting, skull and skeletal parts of an elderly man with quite unusual dimensions, and so on. And the brother of this skeleton, and he corrects himself, the brother of this dead person wanted to spear me at Normanton. And that's a very well-known story. What happened at Normanton? Here are the examples of the methods of obtaining human remains. In Normanton, white locals took Klaatsch on horse rides into the countryside and guided him to the graves they knew. When Klaatsch came back to Normanton, the indigenous people knew very well what he had done, accused him, tried to spear him, The white people told Klaatsch, please stay in the hotel and take the next ship out of town, which he did. Then Clotten donated money to the church in North Queensland, and then the Archbishop told the local pastors in the remote areas to show Klaatsch the graves, where the indigenous people had begged the pastors not to reveal the graves. Okay, other places Klaatsch talked, asked, or bribed the workers at jails, cemeteries, churchyards, and so on, to show him the graves and let him do it. He also used the contacts at universities, anatomists. Now, what I would like to come to now is that I was also doing research here in the skull collection at the Cathedra Anthropologie. And I was here in 2006, and I did a photo documentary of the collection. I was very well received, it was very nice. Professor Pawlowski, are you here? So, where are they? What I want to tell you is that we have a number 9. Just one example on this list, show you here. We have a number 9 from Normanton, a skull. That's probably him. And this is for the colleagues in Australia. That's a 2-page list, which I made a photo documentary. And what I would like to say with that the historical documents of Klaatsch in German, now in Mannheim, they correspond, they match, they overlap with the skull collection here. And we should all work together to, to get a progress. Now, repatriations that have happened in Germany, where I helped with the documents, perspectives for further research and possible repatriation. Human remains are no objects, they are human beings and they belong to Australia. It was said by the other people, Klaatsch as a multifaceted personality. That's my last slide. And he had many sides to his personality. He also scandalized the maltreatment of indigenous people. He took a lot of photos when he came across this situation. And he quickly figured out the whole system. Wealthy pastoralists, they just wanted the people off the land, and the police were paid per head. So how, the number of indigenous people they brought in changed and were paid per head, no matter if these people had committed any crimes or not. And they were just kept in jail like lions in a cage. Other quotes that he said, I translated a couple of quotes. The step from the Stone Age to the age of electricity will inevitably be a deadly one. That's what he said. Asking the innocent sons of the wilderness to do this step in one generation is asking for too much. So these are original quotes, 2 original quotes that I that's telling you a little bit of what he thought. So he was a very keen, very independent observer and witness of the situation, and therefore he is a very important source. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.